Hello everybody. I want to welcome you on our third lecture from this year. I want to welcome Maarten Gielen from Brussels. He's our guest today with his lecture Roadside Picnic. Maarten was in Prague already a few times, and I was attended his lecture in 2015 at Umprum. Which was quite a nice lecture for me, and it was organized by Jana Pavlova. It was really a great talk, and now, almost after 10 years, you are back here. You were also last year in Prague on Umprum again, actually, in the studio of Eva Frank. Okay, Maarten is designer and researcher. He founded studio or collaborative collective Rotor in 2005, and after almost 20 years of working together, you step back a bit, and you are now a partner of or you founded a new studio, Halfwerk, in Brussels. And yes, okay, thank you for coming, and enjoy the lecture. And
thank you. So for me, it's always a pleasure to be in Prague, and I thought these poor people have architecture lectures every week. Let's try to do something different. So what you're getting tonight is 2 for the price of 1. You get a sort of a book review and a testimony of my practice in the last few decades. So I want to just give you a brief introduction so that everybody is on the same page. In the presentation there will be a number of extracts from a book that is called Roadside Picnic, which was written in 1977 by the Strugackých brothers. And just to make sure that everybody is on board, I'm going to summarize the premises of that book. The idea is that the Earth has been visited by aliens. These aliens have not bothered to make contact with us, to leave a message, or to do anything of that kind. But the areas that they have visited, which we call the zones, they left some technology behind, and this technology is very strange, violates all the natural laws that we know, violates the principles of causality, more in particular. So the governments of these different areas build gates around it. There's like an institutions, that research institutions, and so on. But there is a number of people who escape this logic of institutionalization, which we call the stalkers, which are simply people who go in clandestine, steal and explore those areas, and sell whatever they find to the outside world. Is that clear? Then let's get started.
A picnic. Picture a forest, a country road, a meadow. Cars drive off the country road into the meadow. A group of young people get out carrying bottles, baskets of food, transistor radios, and cameras. They light up fires, pitch tents, turn on the music. In the morning they leave. The animals, birds and insects that watched in horror through the long night creep out from their hiding places. And what do they see? Old spark plugs and old filters strewn around, rags, burnout bulbs, and a monkey wrench left behind. And of course the usual mess. Apple cores, candy wrappers, charred remains of the campfire, cans, bottles, somebody's handkerchief, somebody's penknife, torn newspapers, coins, faded flowers picked in another meadow.
Given that this is a lecture about materials, I thought it would be relevant for me to tell you that I am allergic to cobalt and nickel, which are two metals that are being used in the production of steel, and most specifically in the production of stainless steel. And the place that I owe these allergies to is the one in the middle of this picture. It is the scrapyard, local scrapyard of where my parents live in Ninove, close to Brussels. And from my 13 till my 18 years, I spent most of my free time in this place. So you have to imagine a kind of an area where local contractors or just private individuals would come with their pickup truck, and in the back is all of the scrap metal that they want to sell. I had a number of clients. I was just also fascinated by that whole process, and for some reason I was tolerated as a 13-year-old to be present in that choreography. Now, when I moved to Brussels at 18 years old, the scrapyards were not so tolerant, and I was looking for other forms of materials to work with, to sell, to think about, and so on. And in this picture, you see Tristan in front of the Cité Administrative, which is a government building that at that point had been sold by the government to a private developer in a sale and leaseback operation. So we started looking for ways into the demolition sites of the city of Brussels, nightly escapades through windows, by breaking into neighboring parking garages and so on. What we found on those demolition sites were mesmerizing quantities of materials, things that are not typically the stuff that you find in a DIY store, things that sometimes don't really even make sense. We went home with bits and pieces of salvaged stuff that we could secretly put in our backpack, stuff that would pass the window that we came in through, as that was an important requirement. Oh, sorry. So this is the stuff, an example of the sort of stuff we brought home.
The floor of the valley was covered in a pure green liquid, glistening greasily in the sun. A light steam was wafting off its surface, becoming thicker between the hills, and they already couldn't see a thing 30 feet in front of them. And it reeked. God only knew what was rotten in that medley, but to Redrick it seemed that 100,000 smashed rotten eggs, poured over 100,000 spoiled fish heads and dead cats, couldn't have reeked the way it reeked here.
From demolition sites, Tristan and myself, and what would soon become Rotor, we started being interested more at large in the material economy of the city of Brussels. How do materials interact with the city? How do they enter the city? How are they processed? And so on. What you see here is a collection of hides that is waiting to be processed in a company that is situated just next to the slaughterhouse, fairly in the center of Brussels. So the process is that the remaining scraps of meat need to be removed from these hides, which are then stored in quantities of salt, so the container that you see on the bottom left. Now, this is for me an important moment, this visit to this very smelly factory, because it made it clear that in many cases the story that could be found in these places was as interesting as the materials that could be found there. For instance, the relationship between the hide that we know as the luxurious material, the leather skin and so on, and the animals that are breeded for meat production is a very particular one. This is a cow, as I said, that is breeded for meat production, and so the development of muscles is the most important thing, and that is what they are breeded for, to the point that these animals can no longer give birth through natural ways, and each birth is a cesarean cut. So when you look at the hides that come from these animals, you can see almost exactly the same way where the cesarean cuts were made, where the skin is thinner and so does not survive the tanning process.
How can I give up stalking when I have a family to feed? Get a job? I don't want to work for you. Your work makes me puke, do you understand? This is the way I figure it. If a man works with you, he is always working for one of you. He is a slave and nothing else. And I always wanted to be myself on my own, so that I could spit at you all, at your boredom and despair.
So Rotor became a second-hand building materials store some 15 years ago. We became specialized in salvaging parts of buildings and preparing them for reuse. So my job as a sort of tolerated stalker was to visit the many demolition sites of the city of Brussels and to make lists of the parts that could be salvaged in an economical way. We would basically make a sort of a complete inventory, present this to potential clients, and sell whatever we could sell to those, well, within the time frame that we were given by the demolition company. So that brought me to visit a large number of surprising spaces. For instance, what you're looking at here is not a supermarket, it is a staging area for a supermarket. So you have to imagine that the products that you see in a supermarket, the way that they are positioned on the shelf, is actually the process of a corporate strategy of what to put where, in what quantities, and so on. So for each supermarket that you know, there exists a sort of a central headquarters where they make a standard position of each product, they document, they photograph how it needs to be, and this is sent out to your local supermarket for reproduction. And that is why a Billa here in Prague will probably have the very similar type of display of products than the one out. So there is this constant in the kind of spaces that we were visiting, or that I was visiting often alone at that time, is that they were part of a corporate culture. So the obsession with acoustics that results in these acoustic ceiling panels and with even light, the sort of the importance that is given to entrance halls and lobbies, the use of granite in various colors, and meeting rooms. Meeting rooms as if they are like small temples. You don't really know what's going on there, but just entering those rooms, you know that it's going to be important. And this corporate culture started to be fascinating to me. For instance, well, it started to be fascinating, especially at the moments where it slipped into a sort of an excess. It became something out of the ordinary. And what you see here is the result of a workshop, a team building workshop that was organized by a very large real estate company from Brussels, and they were given the possibility to use spray cans on some of the walls of an office building that was slated for demolition. And one of the things that I find remarkable, and I don't know if this was the assignment that they were given or if this was sort of like an automatic thing, but is that every participant in this workshop started writing the name of the company, which in a way is what binds these people together.
The problem is we don't need to notice the years pass, he thought. Screw the years. We don't need to notice things change. We know that things change. We've been told since childhood that things change. We've witnessed things change ourselves many a time, and yet we are still utterly incapable of noticing the moment that things comes, or we search for change in all the wrong places.
One of the bigger and economically most successful demolition sites that we did was a bank building from the end of the 70s. Actually, now that I think of it, more or less the same year as the year Roadside Picknick was written in, of course on the other side of the wall. The building contained huge quantities of very high-end design. Two of the most important post-war designers, or the most economically appreciated post-war designers of that period, Christophe Gevers and Jules Waps, had been active in designing this headquarters. So we salvaged large quantities of materials, like for instance, this cafeteria that was situated on the -3 level of the building had this beautiful decorative wooden ceiling. I think in many building sites today, the budget of that ceiling is like the budget per square meter for the whole building. So we were very happy to find that, but we had a logistics problem, which was that this stuff didn't fit into the elevator, and so we had to lift it up through the ventilation shaft with a crane that cost us something like 200 euros an hour and was slowing things down. And so we had a meeting, and the demolition contractor was present, and he's like, I don't understand, why don't you just use the door to the parking garage that is also on the -3 level? You can drive with your van till there, or forklift truck or whatever. And we're like, door, there is no door. You know, there is no door in that cafeteria to the parking garage. And so we go visit the site together with the demolition contractor, and he says like, well, here's the door, and we're like, it's a wall. Door, wall. Guys, you know, this is a demolition site. And so indeed, actually, the parking garage was in direct contact with the cafeteria. The only thing separating it was a non-load bearing wall, which is not a wall at all if you talk to a demolition contractor. A non-load bearing wall is just like a door. And I find this story very interesting because it shows how architecture, which is extremely changeable, which can be changed actually with something as little as a forklift truck and an angle grinder, conditions us to think that it is permanent. Not only that it will always exist, but also that it has always existed. And it is only on those moments of change, of radical change like demolition, that for a fraction of a second you think actually this place could be something totally different. And these moments of transition, how to document them or how to interact with them became a theme for me. And I think this example is a very speaking one. So what you have is you have the Flemish government who decides that in order to better manage, and that I'm using italics there, the attempts of undocumented migrants to go to Calais and then cross over into the United Kingdom, the Flemish government decided that all trees close to areas along the highway where trucks were being parked needed to be cleared of trees so that there were better lines of sight. My point is that if you go to a parking today in Flanders and you see a lawn, you will never imagine that it is a sort of a anti-migration measure. Like nobody, if I would give a guy the tour of that gas station, nobody would do it. But at the moment itself, when there is news articles, actually the news articles are not outraged by what is happening there at the scale of the landscape. I mean, a whole territory is being accommodated for a very specific political purpose. The outrage, the scandal that happened was that the trees had been cut in the right period. So you have invasive American cherry that is being cut. You have this outrage of nature organizations because it happens in a period where there is a lot of migrating birds. So this whole theme becomes sort of like interconnected in a very weird way. And these examples of how our material environment is being adapted constantly at new ideas, new politics, is a constant one. Like for instance, after the bombing of the airport in Brussels, you have this moment where the army is very present in the streets, but then that threat level is considered to be lower after 1 or 2 years, and so the army sells off huge quantities of materials that it no longer needs. You have the success story of WeWork transforming the way office spaces are being considered, like flexible and so on. But then that company goes bankrupt, and all of a sudden you have like a flooding of the second-hand furniture market with like mid-range office furniture and other furniture. Like there's been so huge quantities of nearly new hay furniture on the Brussels market that it was like underappreciated for quite some time. And Rotor got better and better at capturing these streams. The demolition of the lobby of North Station, well, it's actually called differently, but it communicates with the North Station, resulted in these vast quantities of metallic cubes that were used as decorations. We sold 6,000, 7,000 of them, $50 a piece, you know, real business. And as a consequence, we started developing a clientele that appreciated the value and the story behind these materials. Here you see a very beautiful project of a cladding that was made from the marble from the North Station.
Then I have been slapped. Does the bastard think I am pulling this stuff for the dough? For God's sake, I think. Asshole, what do you take me for? I even open my mouth, ready to shower him with curses. And I stop. Because, actually, what else could he take me for? A stalker's a stalker. The money is all that matters to him. He gambles his life for the money. So it follows that yesterday I threw out the line, and today's I'm working the bait, checking up with the price.
I think it's about time that I explain you how the second-hand business works. Here you have a 550 euro hay chair new. Here you have 4 second-hand chairs of the same designer at roughly 250 euros a piece. So there is a relationship between the new price and the second-hand price. So this is the best so far that I've come up with how the second-hand furniture business works and how it relates to the production of new chairs. So on the left, you have the raw cost of the material, which is actually almost nothing. It's the wood before it's being processed. It goes through manufacturing, and you'll end up with a chair that is maybe 70, 80 euros in manufacturing costs. Then it goes through the process of wholesale, where it doubles, triples in value, so you end up with something that is around 250 euros. So if you call Hey and you say, I want to buy 1,000 chairs, that's more or less the price that you'll pay. But if you want to buy 4 chairs, then you go through retail, which doubles again that price. So you'll end up paying 550. Wholesale is roughly at 250, and production is roughly 1/3 below that. Then there is like a very clear split, which is the end of the first use. The moment it transitions to a new usage. And you have quite different strategies. Like for instance, if you are a corporation and you're paying, I don't know, 20,000 euros a month to rent a building, and you decide that you could move to another building, those 1,000 chairs that are somewhere in the basement, they just need to go as fast as possible. So you'll ask for a moving company to come and pick them up and get rid of them. So the price goes below zero. You pay maybe 5-10 euros a chair just to get rid of them. That's the most extreme scenario. Now, if you kind of are less pressed for time, you can sort of sorry, I think that's the most typical scenario for larger clients. They have no idea of the value of what they hold. They hold also a lot of very shitty, very crappy furniture, which is actually has a negative value. So it's logical that they react that way. Now, if you are a private individual, like imagine your grandma has bought 6 chairs at 550 euros a piece, she will remember. You know, she will tell you 5 times, and by the time you inherit these chairs, you know that these chairs are worth something. So if you cannot use them, you'll put them on Facebook Marketplace, or you'll try to make some money out of it. If you don't particularly like your grandmother, or you live in the Canary Islands and you don't want to come back to clear her house, this stuff ends up in the flea market, where some people will pick it up to bring it to the design shop. So 2 things that we haven't mentioned yet is the whole green office furniture. So you'll see that green office furniture is sort of the same price as the B2B market, because it's actually the same clients buying at the same prices, just in different arguments. They'll say like, we have a carbon neutral chair. Okay, it's been used, and so the carbon is being attributed to the first use. So as far as I know, the reuse market, this is more or less how it works for furniture in every country that I've been.
A new breed of stalker has appeared, armed with technology. The old stalker was a sullen, dirty man, stubborn as a mule, crawling through the zone inch by inch on his stomach, earning his keep. The new stalker is a tie-wearing dandy, an engineer, somewhere a mile away from the zone, a cigarette in his teeth, a cocktail by his elbow, sitting and watching the monitors. A salaried gentleman, a very logical picture.
The largest salvage operation that I was part of, which was also more or less the last project that I did being a part of Rotor, was the reuse of an entire building. So the building is situated just outside of the city, maybe like 10 kilometers from Grand Place. And it is an office building from the 80s that was situated in the middle of a plot of land. So you have a 6,000 square meter building, but that is sitting on 14,000 square meters of land. It is owned by a regional development company that actually thought that the best use of that land was to demolish the existing building and build a circle of smaller buildings around it, because the amount of usable square meters would be much bigger than with the current configuration. So when we learned about this situation, well, I don't want to take all the credit, but I came up with a good idea. I figured that if this building was about to be demolished, its value was actually negative, let's say 0, to make things easy. And that meant that we could rent that space with the building on top of it for the value of the land that it was sitting on. So we made a deal with that development company, which said that we were basically paying a percentage of the value of the land, and the building was for free because the building now belonged to us. The condition to that is, of course, that the rent is for 30 years. After 30 years, if we go, we need to take that building with us. It cannot remain. It doesn't belong to us. But so it was a clever way of, you can imagine that being a salvage company in an urban environment, you need a lot of square meters. Square meters is what costs. So this was a way for us to have space at a reasonable price. So we started actually, all of a sudden, we were the owners of these buildings that we typically only worked on in the construction. Acoustic ceiling panels, partition walls, thick carpet floors, and so on. And this coincided with the WeWork that was being, WeWork sort of canceled a number of things. So their materials were nearly new. We started salvaging the materials from the WeWork, including like Wi-Fi routers, LED, wide-angle office lighting, you know, name it. We have a sort of a fake WeWork or standard outlet there, and we were integrating that into our own building.
Suddenly, for no apparent reason, he felt a wave of despair. Everything was useless. Everything was pointless. My God, he thought, we can't do a thing. We can't stop it. We can't slow it down. No force in the world could contain this plight, he thought in horror. It's not because we do bad work, and it's not because they are more clever and cunning than we are. The world is just like that. Man is like that. If it wasn't a visit, it would have been something else. Pigs can always find mud.
Yeah, this is the fragile part of the lecture, because I'm not 100% sure on how to explain this feeling. But the best example that I found was the case of Eternit, which is a Belgian company in origin, and the whole asbestos crisis that they provoked worldwide. Now, you know what is asbestos, highly cancerogenious, and a lot of people have gone to trial against these companies. And the main question in these debates was, did the company know? Now, why I'm mentioning this is because often when we talk about corporations, when we talk about groups of people that are structured as a business, we think of them as a sort of a person. Like a person either knows if asbestos is cancerogenious or it doesn't know. But how does a corporation know, actually? How does a corporation deal with information? And so when I found this strong connection to the main character of the Stalker book, the obvious question is, like, who is the alien in this story? Like, what makes it these meeting spaces so strange for me that I consider them as belonging to another universe, almost. And I realized that we could say that it is the corporate world that I was treating as an alien, that the non-human in the room, the non-human having an impact, leaving zones for me to explore as a stalker, was the very large corporation.
Sometimes I ask myself, why the hell are we always in such a whirl? For the money? But why in the world do we need money if all we ever do is keep working?
There is something very strange to come to this realization at the moment where you just acquired an office building, where you have a team that is responsible for maintenance, where you're focused on making decision processes shorter, and so on and so on. Actually, the moment that I realized that the alien was the corporation, to keep up with the metaphor, is also the moment that we were becoming a corporation. And so about a year ago, I decided that I no longer wanted to be a part of Rotor, not because I judge it or because I think it shouldn't exist, but rather because I had a hard time having a relationship with this corporate culture that was being developed. And also, well, I wasn't really operating well in that context. You don't make a stalker the head of a company for too long, you know. It works for a while. So I started thinking about what could be next, and Halfwerk is the company that I founded a year ago. So Halfwerk in Dutch means half a job. So it means unfinished business, but it also means work badly done, or laziness, or whatever. So the starting point for the company was to want to salvage reclaimed steel, so steel coming out of buildings. And if you look at typically the first elements we would demount in an office building is the lighting fixtures, because I don't understand why, but lighting fixtures are so expensive compared to their production cost. This is a screenshot of a store that bought these from us. They managed to still double the price, which I already thought ridiculous. What you have is a little piece of steel that is folded with some paint on it and a bulb behind it. And the bulb we replace, and the fitting and the electrical wire. So it's just a little bit of sheet metal. And so we salvage very little pieces of sheet metal, while huge quantities of sheet metal in that same building go to waste, notably in the form of acoustic ceiling panels, which you must have understood I have a sort of an obsession with by now. These acoustic ceiling panels have a beauty beyond comprehension. They are made out of perforated steel, which gives all kinds of optical effects. Together with partners and friends, notably this is a project I did together with Lisa Blessing, I started to explore sort of what other capacities does this material have instead of like keeping up with acoustic foam. So a number of designs came from that. This is all just not even repainted. One of the things that I wanted was not to repaint the steel. So how far can you stretch the steel of an acoustic ceiling panel before the paint cracks was a very important thing for me 6 months ago. How does the transparency work? The same panel in different conditions of light gives totally different feelings of transparency. It's just also really cheap to work with. So this is an installation I did for a co-housing in Brussels. There were a number of technical issues that came to surface, and one of them was that if I wanted to sell to sort of like sophisticated, fancy rotor clients, they would like the story of the salvage enough that the crappy detailing wouldn't bother them enough. But if I wanted to sell to like anybody through average consumers, the fact that this perforation was difficult to control and the edges were sharp and the edges were untreated became a problem. On the other hand, if I started working with like other salvage steel, this is a radiator cover or a piece of a shelf that was cut with a water jet and then sandblasted and re-lacquered. It kind of looks like anything you would buy in a shop. Like it could be an IKEA product if I flatter myself. You had like the ultra specific on the one side and the ultra generic on the other side.
Well, you have got a point, said Noonan absent-mindedly. He glanced casually at Redrick's briefcase, sitting on the nearby chair, and rubbed his finger over the silver plating with the Cyrillic engraving. That's exactly right. A man needs money in order to never think about it.
So then I got lucky. A site in Germany, an old sanatorium where in the 70s, for some weird reason, could be American money or whatever, they had bought at least 60 Knoll, Saarinen tulip chairs, and they were being sold off through public auction. But they were on an island in Germany, so most bidders were like, organizing transport and logistics for that thing is going to be held. So I got them for almost no money. I sold them almost immediately for more money, and with that money, I bought a machine. Now, if I had known how much it would cost to move this 9-ton machine, if I had known that I needed to reinforce the whole driveway because the crane also weighs 20 tons, and so what you see on the right is kind of like 29 tons of steel in action, I'm not sure I would have done it. But what I bought is this gorgeous turret punching machine from 1983. So on the left you have the central computer, which controls a number of tools that are on the right. So the tools of a punching machine are quite simple. You have a positive shape, let's say a circle. You have a negative shape, a hole the size of that circle. The steel goes in between. The punch goes down, and you make a hole of that of that size. And so you have all kinds of shapes. Actually, have 320 punches, more or less, little rectangles, little stars, and so on. So now I could make my own my own perforations. So here you see the machine in action. So the machine can hold 20 different shapes, 20 punches at the time, and the code is super simple. You basically say use punch number 5, go to coordinate number x2, y5, and make a hole. Repeat that every 5 centimeters till you reach that point. It's super simple code. So I could make the patterns that I wanted. I have no problem anymore with the edges because I can just forget about them.
Most of the mystifying debris is extremely dangerous. Some proves useful, eternal batteries that power automobiles, but the scientists never know if they're using the devices for the proper purposes or employing, as it were, Geiger counters and as hand axes and electronic components as nose rings.
So what a punch does really badly is produce fluid lines. A punch has certain advantages compared to a laser cutter. They are very minimal. That's why everybody is on laser cutters today, and you don't have a turret punching press in the fab lab of your school. So I have the hope that this machine can bring a sort of a form of an aesthetic to the reuse of the sheet metal that I want to do, because there's one thing that a punch does really well. It is not caring a damn about what you punch. If the steel is painted, if it has a layer of aluminium on it, if it's like a little bit thicker, if it has a zinc coating, all these things that would require you to have a very strong environmental permit if you would try and do that with a laser cutter because of the fumes, because of the reactions, and so on. A punch just goes through anything. I can cut from like 0.4 millimeters to 6 millimeters of steel, 400 cuts a minute. Bam, 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 bam. It's like super fast. So if you want to make like a large quantities of small holes, I am much faster than any laser cutter. But like you cannot make a circle out of small circles, right? So what you see here is an attempt to deal with that, instead of trying to make the rugosity, which is actually the difference, the closest you can put two cuts together, will always give a little edge. And so this is an attempt of not trying to minimize this edge, this default, but to use it as a form of an expression. Also, money is gone, the chairs are sold, so it's basically the only decent machine I have in the workshop. So I need to find ways to do everything with this machine. I don't have a decent press brake, for instance, so folding is just like making a dotted line and then like folding it by hand, and the dotted line makes sure that that I'm precise enough to make something as simple as a box, and trying to find like purposes for this language. You know, it cannot just get stuck into an aesthetic. For instance, this is a bolted coffee table that I made for a client of mine. They ordered 4 welded tables, which was a previous model, but when I heard that they were shipping like a cubic meter of air to Luxembourg, I thought, why not put the holes close enough together so that it can actually easily be folded by hand, and it's like a super flat pack thing. It's like a flatter pack than IKEA has ever managed to produce. You transport 0 air, just a little bag of bolts. Where I am now in the process is that I'm starting to invite others to come and play with my my toy. For instance, this is a project together with Nathalie Dewey, who's a brilliant lighting designer, always very minimal shapes, maximum effect. And we were going over proportions, making different prototypes. And I started using this steel as a sort of a cheaper way to continue making these prototypes, because the discussion was just about proportions and easier ways of hanging and producing and so on. And so this steel is aluminized steel, 0.7 millimeters or something like that, and it's actually leftovers from a company that builds machines. And leftovers in such a company is very hard. I mean, you're not going to tell your client like, oh, do you mind if we realize that machine in like this steel that we happen to have laying around? It's not how industry works. They produce according to specifications. So this batch was laying around for quite some time and had been stored outside. So the white dust that you see on it is aluminium oxide. And by making these prototypes of lights, we actually started liking the aluminium oxide to the point where we wanted as much as possible of it to remain on the light. And what happens there is that every light, of course, that we are making in this series is a one-off. Like, to sell it, I have to take a picture of each of these materials, but also the material steel, which is this abstract material that comes out of a forge, and you describe it in a single line in your project, all of a sudden gets a body, gets a soul, becomes super specific. And so it becomes a material that is not just a support for paint, that is just not just a carrier for something else or something technical, but it is something that can have an expression of its own. So I was extremely happy with this return of materiality in my practice, where at 13 years old, when stuff came in, it's a sort of a visual appreciation, not about function, but really about the aesthetics of things, is something that I have found back now. And that is it. That is the story that I wanted to tell you. Shall we take? Do you have questions or want to make remarks or?
Thank you for your lecture. Firstly, yeah, it was an update from the last time after the 10 years. So, I don't have actually a particular question, but if there are questions in publicum, you can.
Well, you have a mic now. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to use my microphone privileges, but I didn't want to be rude about that. My question regards that little tenant trick that you did with that building. As you mentioned that you...
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah, my question is regarding the tenant trick that you pulled with that building that you rented for the price of the land that you were explaining. And I was wondering why exactly that building was put up for demolition Is it because there is like some flaws in the structure or something, or is it simply not being used and the original developer wanted to demolish it? And how strict is the contract that you have to demolish it after 30 years of being a tenant? And what happens if there is another smart tenant coming up to that developer and being like, oh, can we rent it now for another 30 years?
Yeah, so that's a lot of questions, but like the two main answers is that the building needed to be demolished because the office market has completely changed. So there is too many office spaces, and only the premium office spaces, which are downtown in the center of Brussels, have a viable future as an office space. So the typology was a first problem. Well, the typology in that location on the outskirts of the city, and the second one is that it's a 6,000 square meter building footprint on a 14,000 square meter land. Right, so it's more than half of the land is just circulation, which is a very uneconomical way of using that land. So at one point, somebody makes an Excel sheet. It's like cost of demolition, cost of construction times that many square meters, rental income projected over 30 years. Bam, that building has. I mean, the optimum economic strategy for that building is to demolish it and build something else. And you know, 30 years is a long time. So that's the second part of your question.
Thank you.
Maybe now I have a question. I want to ask you if you, with the Rotor, if you did a project with the housing, if you dismantle a housing project and try to reuse?
So, you know, that schematic of showing how value is being attributed to materials, there's a big difference between how private individuals do it and how corporations do it, right? So earning money by getting anything from private individuals is really, really hard to do. So that's the first one. Second one, like individual housing, you have a problem of scale. And collective housing is like, if you compare the quality of the material finishings of a bank building with collective housing, it's like I'll take a bank building any day. You know, it's just much more interesting to work. I mean, collective housing is just too cheap, and individual housing is just too small to work on, more or less.
Yeah, I suppose that, but I wanted like Rotor growth a bit, so maybe there was a possibility to try also step out of this market.
It's the other way around. In the beginning, we used to do it, but then you realize that I mean, the entrance of a corporate building, you'll have, I don't know, 300 square meters of Carrara marble, no problem. A bathroom for a private individual is like you'll have 5 square meters of Carrara marble, and half of it is cut by plugs and whatever fixtures the people put up. So, yeah, very hard to do.
Okay, my question connects a bit to this one. You mentioned, or my impression was that with Rotor you managed to find a sort of clientele that already appreciated the fact and was maybe willing to pay a bit more. But is there any systematic support for reuse from, for instance, the government or the local municipalities and governments in Belgium or in the Flanders? Because we're pretty much nowhere in this, yeah. So it's always inspiring to hear if there is anything like tax reliefs or anything. So
the systemic tendency is that labor is expensive and materials are cheap. So the big thing is like a negative impact on a thing. But then through various policies, the Brussels region mostly creates some areas of exceptions in which you can operate. And I have to say that Brussels has had, in my eyes, an exemplary form of governance in that area. For instance, the government has decided that sustainability or circularity, or however you want to name it, is no longer like a specific category within government grants. If you want any type of government grants, your business needs to have a green angle to it, and that's something that gets into effect now, but has been prepared for years. Another thing is that what has happened. I mean, you had an administration that is relatively young. You had a political continuity over 3 legislations. So the same party, the Green Party, was in charge of these measures. And halfway through, they realized their initial agenda, which was about energy efficiency in new buildings and renovation. So in the beginning, they were like promoting energy efficiency. Then a decision came, like these are the standards for isolating. It didn't really make sense to promote more because these standards were actually already quite high. And so you find yourself with an administration sort of looking for what is the next thing, you know, what are we going to promote or experiment with now, and so on. And then I think we played with Rotor a big role in suggesting that you know, not to look only at energy use through the user face of the building, but also see where does all the energy come from for making the materials that it comes from. And so that became an extension of that policy, and it explains why you have a number of interesting initiatives in Brussels now that exist. Yeah, but I mean, it's not a direct support. It's like innovation, training, export, you know, all the kind of the stuff that the European Union will allow states to subsidize. Yeah.
Hello. So Rotor seems like a kind of success story to me. So you needed to get a bit lucky in the beginning, I suppose, because anytime I go to thrift store or some flea market, I can't find anything. So, but you also seem you have some logics and rationales behind the process. So is luck just like an illusion, or what is your relationship with luckiness, and what role does it play in Halfwerk? So this is the question.
I think being lucky is like the essence of being a stalker, you know? It's like when you go into the zone, you don't have an appointment with 30 square meters of Carrara marble. It's there or it's not there, you know? It might be that one day it's there and the next day the demolition contractor drove over it with his forklift truck and it's not worth salvaging anymore. It's like something that you need to accept. I mean, then there's all kinds of stuff that is like know-how and proper safety protocols and having the right tools and so on. Sure, but the basic is like it's not like you have an orchard, you plant trees and you know 20 years later, unless there is like very heavy grail or whatever, you're going to have apples every year. We don't invest in these things. We find them, you know. You see, so it's like a very unpredictable model, and I can assure you that paying 25 salaries, because Rotor DC is now 25 people, on this unpredictability is incredibly stressful. Like, yeah, there's months where like, oh, yeah.
Hi. First of all, thank you for your lecture. I thought it was very interesting. I was wondering, I take it you've gone a little bit more towards the design route now than you did before. And I know of some design facilities that use reclaimed materials, but I think like it's pretty amazing that you actually find the materials yourself.
but I take it takes a lot of time and effort actually like going to pick them up yourself. And I was wondering, have you like ever really calculated how, because I take it's cheaper to get your own, but what do you think that would be viable to buy it firsthand from somebody who reclaims the materials as did your previous company? And I was just wondering if that's something you thought about, or like how that would change maybe the face of your company.
So the big decision that I took a year ago is that I didn't want to continue counting, and so in some cases it might certainly be easier and cheaper to have the steel that I want laser cut and delivered to me exactly in the sizes that I want, but I'd rather sell chairs and take the surplus money of that and do the thing that I want to do than start bending the thing that I want to do in a kind of a compromise between what is economically viable and what I should do. So at the moment I am totally ignoring the economic viability of what I'm doing. It's like it's something that I've given to myself as a sort of a gift. And of course it comes after 20 years of, I don't have savings, but when people have 60 knoll chairs, they call me. So that's good for me.
Okay, yeah, I was wondering about like the how do you say the closed system aspect of that company, because I guess growth of the company would entice maybe pulling back a little bit from the like actual finding of the materials, but
yeah, but the thing is, it's a bit like with steel, like that palette that I showed, where is it, on the left here, that's like 300 maybe 400 sheets of steel. So that's like 600 lighting fixtures for me. It's like scraps of the steel industry are years of materials for me. So so that's also a good thing about it. Unfortunately, there's only 30 of these sheets that have oxidation, so that's like a limited series, and I might go hunting for more of these damaged sheets. But yeah, I mean, I understand your question. I really do. Like, how can we take this experiment, which is what it is, and make it mainstream and make it accessible? And my point is that
that's not what you're looking for.
That this is that it's like it's what I did 20 years long, and I think I left something behind that is fairly operational, and now it's just about something else.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
We have another question there to the left. Is there yeah. Shall we say like one or two more questions and then we go for a beer?
Maybe we have question battle, or
okay, well, we have the last two questions then. Great.
Yeah, so hi. I wanted to ask about Rotor if the way that you approach the well, actually, that's the question. Like, do you approach owners of the sites that are about to be demolished, or is it something more like you have a contract with a demolition company that just comes to you when they get a deal of like, hey, demolition this building, and they go to you and go like, hey, come look at this building if you want something? Or do you seek out buildings that are about to get demolished and then approach the owners and you go like, hey, I want to take a look at what you have?
All of that and many more. Like there's also bankruptcy sales, there's the army surplus sales, there's like collaborations with architects that tip us off, there is overstocks, there is quarry waste, there is sawmill waste. I mean, it's the economic viability of the operation also depends on the mixture of all of these approaches. You know, you need to sort of stabilize your offer. If you only have marble 1 week and then nothing for 6 years, people don't know you as a marble supplier, so you'll never be able to ask a premium price for it. So you sort of need backup plans. Like, you know, there's going to be one building every so many times, and what do we do in the middle? Sometimes it means we buy in Paris, you know. Sometimes it means we buy in Germany, just to supplement the local offer. It's like it's an incredibly difficult business to stabilize. I mean, the easiest way to stabilize it is to buy one huge stock, price it super expensively, and let go very little of it for a long time. That way it's stabilized. But we wanted to have a quick turnover, and we don't want to limit it to only the most exclusive materials. And then it's like multiple approach. It's the only thing that works.
Okay, thank you.
No.
Thank you very much for the lecture. I think I was really impressed that you really have a unique insight into what the reuse and circularity really means. And my question is, with your experience and your insight, can you tell what part of the buildings can really be reused and used again, and is this whole concept actually realistic of reusing parts of the building?
So the way I was checking the reality of something being reusable is like a very simple equation. I take the cost of dismantling and logistics, and I compare it to the market price. If this one is too high, or this one is too low, it's no. If it's like this, it works. So that means if you have beautiful partition walls that are worth, let's say, 300 euros a running meter, yes, I can demand them for that. If those same partition walls are on the 6th floor, or if they are in the street where there is a tram that passes by and I cannot have a truck with a crane for half a day or whatever, it's like it's not the same partition walls for me, you know. So it is about the material. It's about how it's being appreciated. Sometimes you go into a building, and the partition walls on the south side have become paler. People love pale wood at the moment, and the ones on the north side are darker. We will take the pale ones. We leave the dark ones. Like something as subtle as that can change the appreciation of a material. So we're like far away from the engineering, and we're really close to the social sciences on trying to understand. It's like fashion in a way, you know. Or I'm not. Maybe I shouldn't draw a parallel to something I don't know much about, but what I mean it's like almost a curatorial approach, you could say. I am willing to look my clients in the eye and say, pink granite, you never thought about it, but it's like your bathroom. Miss, that's going to be a great bathroom. And if you can pull that off, the pink granite is salvageable. And if you think pink granite is just something the European Commission used in the 80s and is like a dead, boring material, you'll never sell it, you know.
So do you believe in circularity of the building materials, like the wall?
Our economy is stacked against circularity. You have, you know, it's something that is a bit of a cliche because I say it often, but a liter of concrete is cheaper than a liter of sparkling water. Imagine you go to a restaurant, you see a glass standing there from the previous person, half full. Will you drink it? No. Will you reuse concrete? No. It's too cheap. Like doing a test of what rebar is in that concrete is like it. And if you test it there, we didn't test it there, compared to the cost of a few hundred euros of concrete. Concrete costs nothing. Steel costs nothing. You know, it's totally crazy how easy, like if climate change was your goal and you had a limited budget and you need to decide what is the best thing we can do to make as much emissions as possible, it's like you pour concrete with thick steel in it. That's the best thing you can do. So, do I believe in circular economy? Not with this total disbalance of like you do not pay what you get. In theory, yes. In practice, today, no. I'm sorry. Could we try to finish on a slightly more positive note?
It was all the time so optimistic, and at the end we've ended up. Maybe I have like one last story, because we were inspired by Rotor in 2015 by a lecture with my friends and colleagues, and we went to the construction site of the Transgas, which is office house from 80s and was demolished, and we want to be like a Rotor. There was a green marble, quite nice. We spent there like 4 days working on it. At the end, we had like few stones of this marble, and we just carried it by the car, and it's still in the garage of a friend of mine. And yeah, so that was our try. But it was funny. It was quite nice weekend. It was sunny, and it was actually also, it was so easy to enter the site. We just asked the guy there, and we went, can we dismantle this marble? And he, yeah, okay, let's do this if you want.
I mean, the building site that I showed you with the cafeteria on the -3 floor. So the new building was built by Baumschlager Eberle, and I can tell you that we earn more on the demolition of that building than the salary of Baumschlager Eberle to build 50,000 square meters of new offices. So it gives you an idea of the proportion. And so if that wouldn't have been the second building site, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of euros in surplus value, which paid all of the, I mean, we burned it all through stupid, I mean, to doing things like what you just described. If that wouldn't have been the first thing, like if you haven't have like 500,000, a small million to burn in the first 3 or 4 years of operation, then yeah, you have to get really lucky really soon. Yeah.